This video is purely educational. It does not promote or depict real money play. No real hands are shown. Hey everybody, welcome back to Hand of the Day. I want to review this one, and I think it would just be a little bit easier for me to do it over video. So this is the hand. Just to give a quick recap, we are 4-betting in an early position as under the gun against button, and holding ace-jack. So on the flop, we're deciding to go for just a small c-bet. Probably this is something like a range bet. And then on the turn, we check, button checks, and we have the option to bluff on the river. So there were a few comments over here that I'm just going to read out. Charlie Murphy says this has to be one of our weakest hands as far as showdown value goes because we're playing in early positions, and therefore it's a good idea for us to go ahead and jam. Our value range here is going to be something like ace-king. The Godson says that he's also tempted to bluff on the river, but he prefers to go for a smaller size a little bit better because therefore we're also able to bet hands like pocket queens or pocket jacks. And then the final one I want to read out is from Aqua right over here, where Aqua is just saying that the villain dynamics are going to matter quite a lot in this 4-bet pot. And I think this is a very important point that I'm going to mention in just a quick second. The very last one I forgot to mention is that Siki says that he would not jam, and he would rather go for a smaller bet because I think he's saying that the hands would check back on the turn, would also go for a smaller bet. So I think it's something similar to what the Godson was saying. So what's important to understand is that in 4-bet pots, at least from early positions, the ace-king is going to control our overall bluffing frequency because the majority of our bluffs are going to be ace-highs, and the majority of those ace-highs are going to be ace-king. And in spots where we don't have an overwhelming amount of value because we don't connect with either king-queen or with ace-king itself, and on the river, of course, we do interact with ace-king. So we gain a lot of new value, and therefore we're able to bet. Now, the solver actually prefers a half pot-sized bet in this specific situation, in particular because the opponent's own checking range should be condensed towards a decent amount of overpairs like pocket aces, and a little bit of ace-king as well. So the betting range that we do have on the river is just not trying to run into ace-king too much, or pocket aces, but it's trying to really get called by pocket queens, pocket jacks, and pocket nines. That seems to be a little bit better for the solver, and that's why the all-in bet size surprisingly isn't used at this very low SPR of 1. Whenever we're playing in a 4-bet pot, I think the specific player versus player dynamic is going to have the biggest impact. And if you can accurately estimate how your opponent is going to, or at least semi-accurately estimate how your opponent is going to be perceiving your range and your action, this is going to be far better than playing closer to theory, in my opinion. We want to play maximally exploitative in 4-bet pots. Whenever we're checking on the turn, I think a lot of people do have that assumption that we're going to be holding something like ace-king, and therefore they might not even be inclined to call down against 50% pots with pocket jacks or pocket queens, as often as solver does. If we just go back to the data does indicate that people will overfold a lot against bet check bet. The overfold is very big compared to single raised pots and 3-bet pots, and this happens to be the case in so many 4-bet pot nodes, right, where the overfolds and the whatever deviations are just going to be extremely massive compared to the solver. Most people are going to overfold quite a lot here. If you don't want to run into a strong hand, maybe it's a good idea to either check with this hand even, honestly, or use a smaller bet size. 25% pot could be good, because then I think it's a bit more reasonable that you'll get called with pocket queens or pocket jacks. But it would never, ever make sense to use half pot here if you are never getting called by these weaker pairs, and instead you're just always running into something like ace-10 or pocket aces or ace-king, right? It does not make mathematical sense for you to value bet in this situation. Regarding the bluff, I think the bluff should really just fall into whatever assumptions you have based on the villain. The overfold is not going to be exclusive to the all-in size. If you think your opponent is not the type of player who's going to call down with these weaker pairs against half pot, then I think it's perfectly reasonable to just use that size for your ace-jack, because then, you know, you're going to get a very big overfold against that specific opponent, since this is a massive proportion of their overall calling range. By the same token, if you think that they won't call down against 25% pot, which maybe is a very specific read that you could have in a known pool if you play against someone for a very long time, then it could be even better to use that size. However, if you feel like the only bet size that makes sense is all in, because this is going to be the one that applies the most amount of pressure here, and you're not convinced that they're going to overfold those hands if you use anything smaller than all in, then absolutely, I think you should just generally go with that size. I think the key understanding here is that this hand definitely should bluff because you do gain a lot of new value and you don't have many other candidates. So all of your ace highs here are bluffing, and that bluffing is always going to be a lot better based on the population data and the player profile that I defined in the hand of the day screenshot that I provided. And apart from that, I think just villain profile is going to matter what bet size you use. If I was in an unknown situation, I would probably just default to 50% pot, because I think it's going to have generally the same effect of getting people to fold most of their pocket pairs, but you're risking far less than the all-in size if they do want to bluff catch. I think it might work out a little bit better. I hope you guys enjoyed this analysis, and I will see you in the next one.